Eat your heart out, I say. We've just been discussing, there's been a serious bit of getting your geek on over the last couple of days to prepare for this. Welcome. It's really good to see so many people here. It's really good to see such a mixture of folk, many of whom I recognise in my capacity as head of Bootham School, and many of whom I've never seen before in my life. So welcome, whether you're new to us and we know you, or whether we know you. It's good to have so many people here. Particular welcome this evening to anybody who's joining us from the York Independent State School Partnership, because this event is not just a Bootham event, it's an ISSP event, and we hope that the people here will feel very, very welcome indeed. What we're going to be doing is, I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute, but before we do that, one or two introductory remarks. This, in a sense, marks the resumption of the election campaigning after the awful events in Manchester on Monday night. At the school here, we've been affected by that. We know something of the trauma of that event, and it's important, I think, in a few minutes that we spend some time acknowledging that and marking it and reflecting on it. One of the things that came out of a lot of the news coverage I saw on that was a sense in which it was assumed that the election campaign beyond this point would have a new tone as a consequence of the gravitas of the event that happened on Monday night, and I'm looking forward to hearing that this evening. In this hall last week, in our morning meeting on Friday, I showed the students here two videos, both under the moniker of Politics Unboringed, which is a new word I hadn't come across before. And in one of those videos, the presenter who had made the video 2 years ago, just before the previous parliamentary election, talked about the fact that manifestos were very long, boring documents, and there was a lot in them that you didn't need to read. And he was throwing paper over his shoulder, sheets of paper over his shoulder, and he said all you need to do is eventually get to the bits where the parties say something different. And I felt, watching that with the students here last week, that was actually 2 years very out of date. I cannot remember an election since probably the Thatcher era when there has been more difference between the parties than there is this time. And consequently, I think it's a really good opportunity for us to hear about some of those differences this evening, because we've got some very serious choices to make in the next few days. Particularly, this is important for young people, and it's important that we as a school host an event like this. It's important for young people for two major reasons, I think. Firstly, because whatever happens, and whoever gets elected, whichever party or potentially combination of parties gets elected or gets into government, should I say, after the vote, that their education is going to be affected by that. And not only that, it's certainly my contention that what happens in the next couple of weeks is going to affect their lives for much longer than that. And as they become the generation that picks up the baton from my generation, they're going to be living potentially with the consequences of the choices that we make on their behalf, and some of them indeed make themselves in the next little while. So I think it's particularly important that we have this debate in the context of a school. One of the things that I'm going to do, which is slightly schoolmastery this evening, I'm going to try and avoid reverting to type if I possibly can, is to suggest to the candidates, and I've done this already, that we have straight answers to straight questions. A couple of days ago, my middle son took his penultimate final exam at the university in York, and I rehearsed the mantra, as I have done every time any of my children have taken any sort of exam over the last 7 or 8 years, which is answer the question you have been asked rather than the one you would like to have been asked. And we've agreed that that is the way we're going to try and go about things this evening. It's also important to us as a Quaker school, because one of the testimonies of Quakerism is the testimony of truth, and the testimony of speaking plainly. And that's one of the things I hope we'll see exemplified in the debate and the discussions that we have this evening amongst ourselves and with the candidates themselves too. And it's also in the spirit of the Quaker testimonies that what we would like to do to start with is spend a couple of minutes of silence and stillness. It's our habit as a school to begin every meeting that takes place with a period of silence, a period on which to stop and to reflect and to listen, or at least to prepare to listen to what we hear around us so that we can make sensible and thoughtful judgments, it also seems particularly appropriate that we stop and reflect this week in the light of what happened on Monday and in the light of what that does in terms of our country and our priorities and those things that we hold most dear to ourselves. Worth saying that one of the candidates this evening has a connection with the couple who so sadly lost their lives on Monday night. And it's Tesco's at Clifton Moor who are asking if anyone would like to donate anything to the Red Cross in memory of those two people. Please feel free to do so. So, can I just suggest that where we sit, we just spend a couple of minutes silently preparing ourselves to listen this evening and reflecting on the events of the week. It explains our habit at the end of Quakerly silence to shake hands with the people around us. If that seems slightly weird to you, it's not. Can I also bid a warm welcome to those people who are following this on Facebook? I know at least one person is, because my eldest son texted me from Manchester just before we started to say he was watching. So hi, Tom. It's good to have you on board. And anybody else who as well. To those of you who are watching anywhere else but here, and those of you who are here and have the temerity to want to get your phones out at some stage, which we don't do here, but maybe this evening can be the exception. If you want to tweet during the course of the evening, hopefully something that is legal, decent, honest and truthful, please use the hashtag Bootham Debates on the bottom of the screen. James, do I presume that capital letters mean something and are important? They don't particularly. Okay, so if you want to tweet as you go through, please do that, and we might share some of those as we go along. The way it's going to work is this, that to start with, we're going to have one of our students share the results of the sort of entry poll, as it were, the opinion poll as you came in. We're going to do that again later on, and hopefully announce the results of that towards the end. So I'm going to invite Ben in a minute to come up and share the results of that as they stand. Then I'm going to ask each of the candidates, who I will introduce as they stand up to speak for no more than 5 minutes about their policies, and then we will crack on with questions from the floor which have been prepared in advance, and hopefully also have the opportunity to let some of you contribute to that. If we do get to the point, as I'm sure we will, where we ask for contributions from the floor, please would you not start speaking until somebody has thrust a sweaty microphone into your hand so that everybody can hear and we're aware of what's being said. So, Ben, do come and share. The floor is waving at me. Do feel free to stand up and move around to get water if you want. I'd rather you got water than fainted where you sat. So, Ben, do come and share with us.
So, good evening, and I have the results of the entrance poll that you all filled in when you entered tonight. So if we move to the first slide, which is the national voting intention, so this is the question where you're asked to vote, choose the party you would vote for on a national level, and as you can see, the Labour Party took over half of the vote, whereas all the other parties seem to take a smaller portion in comparison. And if we move over to the York Central slide now, we can see that once again the Labour Party has the majority of the vote, taking around about half of the Liberal Democrats' votes, but all of the parties seem to have swapped voters. It's really interesting that most parties have taken voters and lost voters from other parties. And it's much the same story in York Outer. Have that slide, please. Thank you. Where the Green Party was actually split between the Green Party and the Labour Party, but Labour lost as many as it gained to the Green Party, whereas the Conservative Party actually kept the same number of votes. So that is, it tells us a lot about the type of voters we have in this room, that we have many Labour voters. And so I think we have to bear that in mind when we hear the questions tonight, but obviously your opinions may change throughout the evening and you'll have a chance to vote again after the hustings. So thank you very much.
Voting taking place here, which we might come on to in a minute. So, speeches from each of the candidates in turn, no more than 5 minutes, legal, decent, honest and truthful. We're going to start with Ed Young. Ed is the Conservative candidate for York Central. York born and bred, I believe? York bred. I was born in Hull. Okay. Important point. Never mind. We can forgive you for that. So, Hull born, York bred, a chorister at the Minster for many years. And a family who lived in York and ran a business on Gillygate, I understand. Yeah. So very local to the school. Ed, please do.
Thank you very much. The microphone is working. Fantastic success at the start. Thank you very much indeed for hosting this hustings. It is a great honour to be here in Bootham School. This school has had a huge impact on our nation's history, and rightly many of you will recall the great social reformers of the 19th century. Me personally, I was absolutely inspired as a student by A.J.P. Taylor, who was educated right here, who I strongly believe is the greatest historian our country has ever produced, and that is a great testament to the education he had right here. So I think for all of us as candidates who are here this evening, coming to Bootham carries a huge significance. But being in Bootham is also significant for me on a slightly personal level, because this is the first time I've been back to Bootham since 1995, where as an under-12 football captain, I had my greatest ever success as the Minster School under-12 football team. We won 8-2, and I think I scored a hat-trick, but my mother thinks I'm exaggerating. But I certainly scored at least one, and we were over the moon. Bootham were our biggest rivals, and we came back 3 months later to play cricket. Same team, I was the captain, and we got absolutely hammered. We were all out for 30. Bootham scored 300, and off my own bowling, I was hit for over 100 runs. So I'm not quite sure what the omens are, therefore, for this evening's performance. It could be a great success, it could be a crashing disaster, or it might be an honourable draw. But either way, it is absolutely wonderful to be here this evening, because I strongly believe that this is the biggest election our city has faced for many, many years. When I look at York today, I think it is an absolutely wonderful, thriving, successful, beautiful city. I'm a Yorkshireman, so it's no surprise to you that I think that York is probably one of the greatest cities in the world. But I also think that York can be even better. And if you do elect me on the 8th of June, there are 3 big things I would like to do for our city. The first is all about opportunity. I want to give more people in our city the chances that York gave me. So a big part of that means backing our schools and universities, but it also means creating opportunities for our families right here too. Transport has been an absolute headache in our city ever since I was a child. Gillygate, I used to spend most of my childhood getting stuck in traffic jams along Gillygate, and I'm still getting stuck in traffic jams on Gillygate today. So we have to find a way of fixing that, and a big, big thing I would do as your MP is make sure we get the funds we need to improve capacity in York's transport system. That is an absolute priority, and we have to deliver it. Similarly, housing. We definitely need more affordable homes in our city. But it's not just about building new homes. we also need to close the gap between high house prices and relatively low wages. That is a massive, massive challenge for us. And the way we'll do it is about growth and new industries in our city. So my second big priority is all about backing business in our city. I come from a retail background. We've already mentioned the business I work for. I strongly believe what York needs right now is a little bit more salesmanship from its MP. Where over the last 7 years, we've had great growth. We've got more people in work. We've got more businesses starting here, more small businesses starting here and making a success of it. That is a great success, but there's huge opportunities to grow York's economy even further. At the moment, we have 7 million people visiting York as tourists every year, but less than 2 million of those tourists actually stay the night. Imagine the change you could get by encouraging more of those tourists to spend longer in our city. There are lots of things you can do to sell York even better, and I strongly believe that York needs salesmanship from its MP to deliver that. The big thing, my third big priority, is about Brexit. Brexit divided our city. I voted actually to stay in the European Union, but the strong thing we need now, the absolutely crucial thing we need now, is to make sure that we get a good deal, not just for our country, but also for this city. We have to make sure that York's voice is heard when those negotiations take place. Brexit is going to have a profound impact on our country and on our city for decades. We have to have an MP who will make sure that York's voice is heard in those negotiations. So opportunities, backing business, and getting a good Brexit for our city, those are my three priorities. But they're underpinned by one very, very simple belief. For 25 years, we've had a Labour Member of Parliament for our city. I think that both of them have been people of huge, huge integrity. I don't agree with their politics, but I think they are people of immense courage and integrity. My real challenge to them is not the politics, which I do believe are wrong. It's the level of ambition that we've had for our city. I think it is not just the job of a Member of Parliament to fight the government and to protest. I think you have to come in with a very clear plan of what you want to do for the city, the big things you want to fight for. Over the last few years, when I look at York, I think big opportunities have come knocking, and we have not. Is that 1 minute or my time is up? That's my time up. Thank you very much indeed.
Saying at this stage that the order of speakers this evening was decided by lot. So this isn't a put-up job in any sense. So second up this evening we have Rachel Maskell, representing the Labour Party, the sitting MP for York Central. Rachel was first elected at the previous election in 2015, a graduate of the University of East Anglia with a degree in physiotherapy, started working, became a trade union rep, and then the regional and national official for Unite. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you very much, and it is great to be back with you again here at Bootham School. The events on Monday night were devastating. Young people went out for a night of fun and music, and yet evil acts and a perverted ideology tore into our nation, into Manchester, and into the lives of innocent people. Parents lost their children, children their parents. We live in turbulent times, confusing times, painful times. And while we remember, reflect, pray, and act, we must also come together to show that we are far more united and have far more in common with each other than the things that divide us. Our thoughts are with those who are hurting at this time, not least here in our city. But out of the trauma, we witnessed extraordinary acts of kindness. This is the testimony of our nation. I recall on Boxing Day 2015 here in York, as the city was being flooded, the generosity that people showed to strangers, how together we walked through those difficult days as one community. And having worked so closely alongside you in addressing the challenges of climate change, the environment, and flooding, we have made a difference together for our city. And how again, when Bootham Park Hospital closed so suddenly, again, we came together and I took challenge time and time again to government about the failed mental health services and am now turning that ship around. How in this place, packed, we wrestled together over how we should respond to the horrific situation in Syria. And since being elected, I have gathered my constituents time and time again so that we can work together through these issues, not least about the European Union, resulting in me standing aside and not triggering Article 50. Over the last 2 years, I've helped thousands of my constituents address their personal challenges, and I've used every opportunity to speak up for York in Parliament. I've drawn those in power into the issues impacting our city, like transport and health, air quality, education, tourism, jobs and housing, and so many more things. That is why I was named the region's best value MP. But I've also spent hours and hours behind the scenes advocating for York's future. We need to build the housing for local people that local people can afford to rent and buy. And Labour will build these homes, family homes and social housing. We need help for our high streets and the city centre, and Labour will support small businesses and retail. We need good jobs and skills in our city for our future, in rail, in the chocolate industry, in the services sector, in the bio and agritech sectors, in construction, recycling, tourism. There are so many areas. Good jobs for York. And Labour's National Investment Bank will put the money into the economy where it can be most effective. We'll pay the real living wage and we'll end those exploitative zero-hour contracts. We want to save our barracks. Labour has committed to maintaining the barracks in York, investing more in our armed forces than this government, particularly in building the peace, which the 1st Division based here in York are so experienced at. And we want to advance the education of all children. And Labour will again rebuild our schools with a whole national education service, reversing these terrible cuts we're facing, investing in teachers and providing a free university education and lifelong learning, not wasting valuable money on segregation in education, grammar schools and free schools. And of course, Labour will end the NHS crisis. It is not acceptable that 3 million people are on waiting lists today, surgery denied, public health cut and mental health substandard. Labour will invest in your health and social care and scrap the failed Health and Social Care Act. And we certainly won't strip away most your hard-earned savings when you depart this world. Finally, when it comes to our future relationship with the EU, we want a close partnership so that we work together to maximise our opportunities, our national security, maintain jobs, have frictionless trade and protect our rights. We will build bridges with the EU, not throw insults at our negotiating partners. There is such a real choice at this election between someone who has proved to be your advocate and a party which is wedded to failed ideology ahead, not to meet the needs of today, and that lets your taxes go to all the wrong places as opposed to investing in vital services. So I trust that you'll vote for Labour at this election.
At this particular point that we invited all the political parties who are putting candidates up in either York Central or York Outer to send somebody this evening. There is no Green candidate standing in York Central, but Bethan Vincent, our next speaker, is standing in York Outer. Bethan has been a resident of York for 7 years, I think rather like me, arrived as a student and stayed, but she managed to stay a lot longer than I did first time. So Bethan, please
Thank you. Ooh. That's on. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. So, hi, I'm Bethan Vincent. I came from the Midlands to live in York over 7 years ago, first as an undergraduate at the University of York, where I studied history. I graduated in 2013, so I'm not that much older than many of you sitting in the room today. I'm now a permanent resident of Clifton, and I actually work in the constituency of York Outer in Nether Poppleton. I fell in love with this city the moment I saw it. And since graduating, I've done many things to contribute to our community, from running an ethical business, so I do know about small business in the city and the perils and actually the problems in the city we face as small businesses. And I've also attempted to start up a guild myself as well, which has been a bit of an adventure. I want to continue my work in creating a fairer and progressive society by becoming your MP in York Outer. The Green Party has big, bold ideas to create a confident and caring Britain that we can all be proud of. We aren't afraid to hope for a better future or be honest about how we'll get there. We believe in being brave, in speaking our mind and standing up for what matters. We're proud to do politics differently. Imagine a government that trusts in our common humanity and in our capacity to govern ourselves. Imagine a government that believes that the best way forward is by working with each other rather than against each other. Imagine a government that prioritises the rights of citizens and the environment over those of corporations. Imagine a government that gives everyone a chance and leaves nobody behind. That is the kind of government I would work for. So this is what I promise to do for you and for the people of York. I will campaign for your right to vote on the final terms of the Brexit deal, including an option to stay in the EU. I will campaign to end tuition fees for all and write off the student debt, which is crippling our young people, a debt which I actually carry myself to a tune of £20,000. I will fight to ensure that every young person has access to democracy through introducing a voting age of 16, so that almost everyone in this room would have had a say on the events that have happened recently. I will also fight to properly fund schools and protect per pupil increases as well. In York, I will push for genuinely affordable, warm homes through rent controls and direct build initiatives. I will campaign to increase funding for local authorities so that they can provide in good quality public services and actually invest in our communities. I will fight for the NHS to ensure it always remains free at the point of access and campaign to stop the inhumane refusal of treatment that we actually see in our local hospital trust. I will make sure that local development meets the needs of York citizens whilst protecting our natural spaces. So when we're talking about transport, looking at sustainable solutions that aren't necessarily about putting more cars on the road, but improving access to people who want to walk, people who want to cycle. Hell, let's think about outside the box and think about trams, about trains. I will always act strongly on climate change, and I think that's fairly obvious as a Green Party candidate, but I want to reiterate it. I will always act strongly on that, and to protect the natural world that we love. But most importantly of all, I will fight for equality and for a society where nobody is left behind. I am proud to be part of a party which is open to progressive political debate, which is willing to stand down in the best interests of the people, as we've actually done locally in York Central. Most of all, I'm proud to represent a party that believes that there is another way of doing things. We don't believe in playing games. We believe that progress, prosperity and people's rights are more important than party politics. What this means at this election, in fact in any election, if you vote Green, you know what you're getting. If you support our policies, don't vote for a party that just pays lip service to things like the climate crisis or the troubles in the NHS, education. If you believe in having a truly green and progressive voice in government, vote for the Green Party, vote for me. Thank you very much.
Last but by no means least, Liberal Democrat Nick Love is going to be speaking to us. Nick also arrived as a student and stuck, but rather longer ago than Bethan did. Arrived in York in 1985. He says he hasn't left. I believe that doesn't mean he's going to stay in the city all that time. But he lives here and has lived here since then.
Thank you. I've lived in York for 32 years, and you still get that feeling of pride when you talk to someone and you tell them where they live and you go, York, and they go, you lucky thing. Sometimes, though, I think living somewhere this beautiful can mean that we take it for granted. We become, through no ill intent, complacent. And quite simply, we cannot rest on our laurels. We have things to build, lives to improve, visions to turn into reality. The world's leading cities are always evolving, and York is no different. Its historic charm attracts 7 million visitors annually, and with them a vibrant economy. But why can't we just celebrate its heritage as well as creating a future for all that live here and all that will live here? York may be a prosperous city, but that doesn't hide the fact that many people I've spoken to are only just making ends meet. On the face of it, they've got jobs that pay well, but they're still getting squeezed from all angles. Rising prices in everyday commodities, fuel bills, wage caps, more demands from places such as council-funded schools asking parents to fill holes in the budgets with donations. One head said to me, without parents giving money, we wouldn't be open. As MP for York, though, its citizens, you, are my number one priority if I get elected. We need to give you the very best possible living experience as residents and the widest opportunity to have a say in what needs changing and to participate in decision-making that improves lives. House prices and monthly rental are too high. York badly needs affordable housing. So we will prioritise house building on identified sites such as York Central, not luxury housing, but affordable housing that is within the reach of first-time buyers. We need a root and branch transformation of transport infrastructure. Roads are clogged, journeys are slow, air quality due to standing traffic is a health hazard. Lib Dems in coalition approved over £900,000 for 9 new electric buses in York and to convert existing diesel ones as well. We must do more. Health workers in York must also feel valued. An increase in funding to enable them to do their jobs effectively has to be combined with a pay rise, so they don't see a constant fall in their living standards. A world-class mental health facility to replace Bootham Park's hospital is essential. One of the founders of this very school was also the founder of modern mental health treatment worldwide as we know it. William Tuke founded the retreat in 1792 in response to a friend dying at the York Asylum through mistreatment. He pioneered more humane methods in the custody and care of people with mental disorders, an approach that came to be known as moral treatment. I'm pleased to say one of my family actually works in mental health advocacy at the retreat now, after Bootham Park was shut. School funding needs increasing as well, not constantly cutting, so teachers get the resources they need to enable them to give our kids the best possible chance of success. We will increase investment by £7 billion and remove teachers' pay caps. Speaking with York's vibrant independent business sector, I believe it cannot be stifled by constant rent rises designed to make up for drastic cuts from central government. We must look at reducing business rates for small businesses. And finally, I'd like to say the mark of this great city was illustrated by how its residents reacted to adversity. In the floods, those acts of unfailing generosity were seen worldwide. Heroes walked our streets those days. Countless acts of kindness from big-hearted citizens. They didn't look for recognition, they just looked for people to help. If you vote for me, I'll be honoured as a community activist in York Central to bring all my knowledge and experience to representing this great city of ours.
First question that we're going to pose to our four candidates this evening is not from the floor, it's from the chair. 2 years ago, when we were here in this hall, many people were here in this hall, we didn't expect to be having another election so soon, especially with the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. I want to ask each of the candidates, for you, and particularly for the party you represent, what is the point of this election? Ed, given the fact your party called it, well, I think we'll start with you.
So I think the point of the election is that we have, as I said in the speech, this is a critical moment for our country. It's one of the biggest moments in our country's history. It's certainly the biggest moment in my lifetime for politics of the future. We have to have the right government in place with the right support leading our country forward. Whether you voted for Brexit or not, Brexit is going to define our country for generations, absolute generations. It's hard to think of something it will not affect. And so if you're going to get a good deal, if you're going to get the best possible results for our country and also for our city, I think you have to go into it with a full confidence of the country, with the strongest possible government in place, and with a Prime Minister who the country is behind. I think this is a critical moment to do it. I think it was very, very challenging the last year following the results of the referendum. The government, as you know, has a very small majority, and this is an opportunity to give the country the choice about who they want to lead it and what will be an absolutely defining time for our nation. And I think that is the reason why it's been called. In terms of fixed parliaments themselves, I'm in favour of the Fixed Term Act. I think that was a very good innovation. There always was the rule that you could change it in a situation like this, and you could appeal to Parliament for an early election. That has happened, and that's the reason why I think it's important.
Thank you very much indeed. Nick? For you and your party, what's the point of the election?
I don't think it should have been called in the first place. That's the first thing I will say. It was a cynical move designed to help somebody within a party, not designed to benefit the nation, as was the referendum. It wasn't done in the public interest, and I can tell you, EU leaders are not going to turn around and go, oh, they've got a 100-seat majority or a 50-seat majority or whatever, we're going to take them more seriously. They're going to take us more seriously if we're statesmanlike and we don't behave like, well, whatever. I think we all see some of the unstatesmanlike and unstatesperson-like behaviour that's been going on. For us, yes, we're hanging our mast on Brexit. Some people call that traitor, some people call unconstitutional because we voted to leave. What I would say is the reason that we're looking at a second referendum is not to insult the public and to say, I tell you what, we're going to try and change your mind no matter what happens. We will go for as good a Brexit as we can get. But there isn't a company worldwide that doesn't give itself a chance to actually look back and say, is this the deal for us? Have we made a choice? And that's what I see it as. I see it as a safety net. And I see Brexit as something that we accept, but what we say is, like any good company or any good organisation, you leave yourself wiggle room.
The point of the election for the Liberal Democrats is Brexit.
It is Brexit, but we can't lose focus in the fact that there are lots of other things to do. I'm going to say it forehead, strong and stable. The fact at the moment is the economy isn't looking that way.
OK, so it's about Brexit. We'll have a chance to talk about economy and things like that later. Bethan, your view and your party's view about this election.
I agree. I'm very cynical when it comes to why the election was called. I think this is a power grab by the Tories. And I think it's very interesting to watch the way the election campaign is run. And it is Theresa May. It's almost presidential, right? It's not about the party because they don't have the policies to back it up. I mean, we've seen the U-turn recently. I think for the Greens, and for me, actually, personally, what this offers is hope and opportunity. And it might sound a little bit silly to say that, but we as a party, obviously, we've always pushed for proportional representation. That is an issue we are very strong about and I care about a lot. And this is an opportunity to show that our current electoral system is broken. And I'm speaking to the young people in the room at the moment. This is your chance to make your voice heard. The choices that we make now will affect your lives the most. They'll affect my lives the most. So we have to make sure that we are involved in this decision. It's an opportunity for us.
Thank you. Rachel.
We have to remember that when the Prime Minister called this election, she also said that she did not want to have the accountability in Parliament. She didn't want to show her hand in these negotiations, but wanted to sail off into Europe and to carry on those negotiations without the checks and balances that she should have. We live in a parliamentary democracy, and it's very important that she is accountable to Parliament. But I said the Prime Minister was reckless when she called the election, because if your interest is getting the best deal for our country, then that is your sole focus. And to take 2.5 months out of a tight negotiating window to put your personal interests ahead of the nation is not the kind of leader that I want running our country. So in calling the election, we said this is an opportunity. Our country is so broken. We've heard about the economy over the last 7 years not delivering for the people of our country. The money is going to the wrong places, the inequality is growing, and our public services are faltering. Therefore, Labour have grasped this challenge to say we can do better, and we really can. With the manifesto we've put forward, we've shown the nation that there is a real alternative to this government, and we're using every single opportunity to get that message out and to say there is real hope in our future under Labour.
OK, so let's move on to our first question from the floor this evening, and that's a question from Thomas McMorran. I think there may be a microphone on the way. Alfie?
How do we best ensure people coming into this country are integrated into British society?
Thank you. Rachel, will you start off on that one, please?
Thank you very much for your question. We, at the moment, really benefit from the free movement we have in Europe, and in particular, our economy benefits from people who come here to serve our country in our NHS, who come and work and pick our fruit and vegetables. And as a result of the many roles that people play, we are a richer country, not just economically, but also culturally, in sharing the prosperity together. And that of cultural identity. The problem we have had, though, since the government came in 2010 is they cut the funds which helped support communities when they had a growth in migrant communities moving into their communities. And as a result, yes, tensions have risen in certain communities. So we would restore that fund back to support those communities, support the services in those communities, and ensure that we are working across different communities, because we embrace diversity in the Labour Party. We believe it is to our good that we have diversity. We're not talking about open borders. We're talking about, obviously, controls, checks and balances, which are so important to our future, but ensuring that we work in an integrated way right across our education system, across employment, and across our services really does enrich us. And, of course, that also means that we have the opportunity to live overseas and embrace other cultures too. And therefore, we see that relationship which has flourished under the European Union is so important. Yes, being sensitive to some of the real challenges, and we know many of the challenges is because of the disinvestment we've seen across our public services and support systems, but really embracing people for who they are and the value that they bring.
Thank you.
One of the things, referring actually to Monday, one of the unfortunate things that's happened is you've got on social media the sort of clowns and ghouls that usually appear when something like this happens, calling for internment, calling for social division. And I think one of the great things that's happened is there's been far, far more people with level heads and asking for calm and asking for dialogue, rather than actually for saying, let's just pick on people regardless. And let's, regardless of what they've done or they haven't done, let's intern them. And I think one of the key things within this country is our openness. People come here because of our way of life. We could not survive without people coming in to help us with our services. The NHS would crash if we didn't have people coming in and immigration. And one of the things, that you look at is that when we did talk about Brexit, and I'm not going to dwell on Brexit a long time, but one of the things, when I talk to people, I went to the Polish Day. They had a Polish Heritage Day a couple of weeks ago. There were over 400 people there from the community within York. One of the great things was they'd encouraged people from the local community and all over York to come and chat with them and learn about their culture. They had Polish food. Luckily, one of our candidates that's standing in Hull Road is Polish, so he was able to converse as well, which went down well. So it's about diversity. It's about investing in the infrastructure to help them fund things like that. And it's actually just keeping the dialogue going and showing that we want to be inclusive, but also understand their culture and invite them to understand ours as well.
How do we, given the fact the question was about how they are integrated, I set the point that we want to understand them and what they bring to us. But
I mean, one of the things we don't do, for instance, is, we don't, for want of a better phrase, ghettoise them. So what we do is we have mixed housing throughout York. We don't have pockets of people living in certain areas. We make sure that we invite them to local ward meetings. We try and get them involved in local activities. I think the role of local councillors can help within that as well, because what they can do is they can reach out and make them feel included. And it's all about inclusivity. It's about saying to people, we respect you, but we want you to be one of us as well. You're living in our country with us. You're going to be part of us. Why not be one of us as well?
okay, thank you very much. Ed?
So, Thomas, I think the honest answer is that if any of us actually said we had a simple answer to that question, we'd be lying. It's an incredibly complicated issue. I strongly, strongly don't believe that in a debate about this, you should talk about money. This is about values. The fundamental cause of integration, the reason why we build a cohesive society, is about building society around shared values, values of tolerance and openness, and that is absolutely the foundation of it. Chris mentioned at the start that the business I work for, and the response of that business to what has happened shows the strength of great community spirit. It is absolutely phenomenal the way that business, the colleagues from across the country come together and bring people together. You need that at every level. You need it in schools, you need it in businesses, you need it in community groups. That is the absolute foundation of it, shared values. I do think our education system has a fundamental role to play. I think we have to make sure that there is a shared education system which entrenches and cements the values that we hold dear at an early age. And then a third thing I would say is I fundamentally think there is an issue of role models. So I work for Saeeda Varsi, who was the first Muslim in cabinet, the first Muslim to chair the Conservative Party and the first Muslim in cabinet. And she was absolutely amazing, the way that she would stand out and bring people together, people who'd never thought about being part of our political system. You have to find ways of encouraging more people like that to come to it. York itself is a great history, a great reputation, and a great legacy of integration. We've just obviously built the new mosque not far from here, but we have to find ways of bringing people together, and role models is the foundation. We need more people at the top of our political system sending a signal and showing the way.
Thank you. Before we have maybe one or two contributions from the floor, Bethany.
So this is a very interesting question to me because in my kind of work life, I do a lot of speaking on diversity in the tech industry, which is not very diverse. And what I'd like to talk about is it isn't enough to kind of open the door and let people into your country. You've kind of got to have structures in place. You've got to have culture in place to integrate them once they're in. And I think there's two kind of things going on here. So we've got the kind of macro issues as a nation we've got to think about. And that's things about education. It's about actually funding things like refugee centres and asylum seekers centres so that they actually kind of get the support and the caseworker support that they need to come into this country and actually live kind of lives, really, because they're not allowed to at the moment in many cases. I think in terms of the micro issues surrounding York, there's a number of really good kind of local initiatives going on in groups, so for BAME people, LGBTQ as well, and it's about funding them, supporting them, having a bit more discourse as a city around our diversity, because when you go out into York, I think we're all fairly aware it's not very diverse, and what can we do to bring people in and say, hey, this is a safe space for you?
Thank you. Thomas, I wonder if we can have the microphones back. Thomas, what were you hoping to hear in the answer that you did or didn't hear? Lads, can we have the microphones back in now, please? Thank you. Thanks, Cameron.
So, as someone who isn't originally from York and who's actually from a town way down in South Buckingham, we were a 95% white town, a historic market town, that we've seen a lot of immigration in the past sort of 5-6 years. And we've seen a lot of problems where sort of generally just the culture of the town has deteriorated a lot. We've seen a lot of sort of irrevocable changes. The community in the town has sort of split a lot, so we're a lot less close than we were originally. And the question was really sort of aimed at finding ways to solve the issues and to make sure that we have, even with immigration, these sort of tight-knit communities where we have shared values. And I think for the most part... Do you have any
ideas yourself that weren't proposed from the platform?
So I think the main problem is probably the rate of the immigration that comes in. From what I've noticed, when we have a lot of immigration coming very quickly, then we have the problems just because as a group, those immigrants have more sort of power. They sort of band together, because why would you sort of undergo the effort to change your own culture when you could be surrounded by people who share your culture, if that makes sense? So you end up with sort of not quite ghettos, but within groups within groups. Within
You're suggesting that if the rate was slowed, it would be easier for this to happen?
Yes, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else like to make a contribution to the debate here? The lady in front, if you could pass the microphone forward, thank you.
Hello. What I think is that we spend an awful lot of time talking about you've come here, you have to integrate. I think we ought to have a really good look at ourselves and say, this is our country and it has values. And if anyone in this entire room could say to me that there was a person here who was truly British, and that the British were a group of people that were in any way culturally identifiable, I would show you my history degree and my English literature background, and I would say that's not true. What has made Britain the amazing country it is that we are a country that were Celtic, and that were Roman, and that were Viking, and that took people in from France, that have taken people in from across the world. We've gone out across the world, we've recognised people should come back. And when we become insular and we see ourselves as different and that you must fit in with us, that denies the whole potential of who we are as a society. Instead of saying you're an immigrant, you should be like us, we should say we have always been like you, and that is why we are a culturally, academically and intellectually diverse society.
Thank you very much. Maybe one more comment before we move on to the next question. So are you asking a question later, sir, potentially? There's a gentleman at the back who's had his hand up longer. I don't think we'll be asking one. The gentleman at the back.
I think anyone who looks seriously at our economy, our public services, or our culture will see that immigrants are absolutely vital to us in this country. But I think we also know, if we look around the country, there are places where high numbers of immigrants have caused directly or indirectly strains in society, which is why things that Rachel talks about, funding to support those communities, and things that Nick talks about, helping support groups that build bridges, are so vital. So isn't saying it's not about money, it's about values, isn't that just an excuse to avoid spending the money?
Okay, it seems appropriate, given the fact we're sat in a school, that we should have a question next on education. So I'd like to Sam Rippon, who is a student at Archbishop Holgate School. Sam's over there. If we could get a microphone to Sam so that he could ask his question. It's a good bit of communal work, passing the microphone from one person to another. Thank you very much. Sam.
Hi. Coming from a school that is rapidly increasing its pupil numbers without the funding to expand infrastructure, what is your solution to oversized classes?
Nick, why don't you start us with that one?
More teachers, I think. That's one of the first things. There is a crisis in teaching, as in recruitment. The Liberal Democrats would put £7 billion into funding this. And one of the things is attracting teachers. I've talked to quite a few teachers during the campaign. And sadly, a few of them want to actually get out of teaching because of the strain and because of the lack of resources. And because of actually numbers. And if we're looking at the sort of cuts that may come in, should President May get back in power, you're finding that the average school in York will have a £288 per pupil cut. And a lot of schools are looking at six-figure cuts by 2020. What that means is that an average school will have to lose 5 teachers, so pupil numbers will go up. That simply cannot be the case. We're educating people. The people that we're educating are our future. So we need to invest in them. I came from a school, and it was a comprehensive school, as they were then called. And our pupil class sizes were 20. And you got that one-to-one integration with them when you needed it. You got that FaceTime with teachers. And you got the quality of teaching as well, from teachers that had time to prepare, that weren't constantly hassled and frazzled, and most teachers probably do 70 or 80 hours a week, given preparation. So it's got to be funding. It's not the be-all and end-all. There's got to be obviously restructuring as well. But what we've got to do is invest in education, because if we don't, What we're doing is we're building a future on sand.
So in our 2015 manifesto, which is fully costed, you can go away and check it, we proposed that the class sizes in all schools should be restricted to 20, and that was a cost of £1.5 billion a year. And we feel that is the only way to deliver value, to deliver a proper education to children in our schools. We also want to restore per pupil funding to 2010 levels, so that's at a cost of £7.5 billion a year, and how we're going to pay for this, because that always comes up, it's basically an increase in taxes for the 1% and on businesses. Businesses really need to step up and invest in our future. They're the ones that actually profit from having bright young minds educated to degree level, postgraduate level. And so that's where we'd like to see the money come from. We also think that academies and free schools should be bought under the local authority system. This means that we can consolidate spending, it's going to be a lot more manageable, and that everyone's kind of guaranteed the same education. I think it all comes back to this idea of equality. How can we expect to have an equal society where some people are educated to a higher standard than others? And this is a process that starts at nursery age, so from the age of 2. So we'd also like to see free education for all under 7s up until the point of 7 where they would go to school as well.
Thank you. Rachel.
Well, Labour certainly has put education right at the heart of its manifesto with the creation of a national education service, because we don't believe that we should be making cuts to our children. As Nick said, £288 for every child in York, children with special needs also experiencing a lack of being able to have flexibility within the budget. In the classrooms, now we're seeing so many teachers leaving the profession because not just the stresses they're under, but also then narrowing the curriculum so that teachers can't expand children's minds and enable them to learn, but instead have to force children through exams, which is not why people have come into the profession. We're seeing classroom assistants being laid off, support staff being laid off, which are vital in able to help children with their learning. And we're seeing this big boom in unqualified teachers leading classrooms, and that is not acceptable. So we have said, as we did in 1997 and delivered, we will cut those class sizes and reduce them back to a position under 30 for primary school children so that they can have that personalised learning moving forward. And we won't force children through continuous assessment, but we'll enable teachers to judge how to shape children's minds in the future. And of course, we won't invest in those vanity projects of free schools and grammar schools, but have a proper integrated education service pulled under the local authority. But we also need to make sure we have got the classrooms which are fit for purposes today. We have a school in York whose uniform includes a hoodie because it's too cold in winter for the children to study, and it is really cold. Now, Labour had that school under Building Schools for the Future and was going to build a new school there. And for 7 years of campaigning from my predecessor and myself, the Tory government have refused to build that school and to address many crumbling schools in our city. And I've met with the ministers and they're still refusing. And I did expose the broken programme they've got for school infrastructure as well, and showed them how their assessments were inaccurate. And therefore it's important we've got the infrastructure as well as the teaching staff to make our schools great and really invest in children's futures.
Thank you. Ed.
So, So let me just put this in a little bit of historical context, because there's an element of false consciousness in some of those answers. Funding per pupil was falling under the Labour government until 2010. It was an incredibly challenging situation that the government came into in 2010, and we made a decision to protect and grow the schools budget. We had to make cuts elsewhere, but we made a decision to grow the schools budget. And funding on schools has grown. The challenge, exactly as you say, is that there is a rising pupil numbers and the funding is put under pressure as a result. So the answer is not just simply spending more money, but by the way, we will. We'll spend an extra £4 billion over the course of this Parliament. But what you also need to do is you have to find a way of catering, unblocking the education system so that the right reforms are in place. My understanding is that there are many schools in our city who want to become academies but haven't been able to be given enough speed to become academies. So there's a question of whether the council has enough resources for them to become academies. And the other thing is making sure that independent schools, including like this one, are more bought into the support of state schools and have their charitable status is linked to their support that they provide to schools. So that is a massive priority. We have to find a way of continuing reform because, yes, money is part of it, but it isn't just about money.
I wonder whether this might be quite a good moment just to do a quick straw poll, because one of the points that was raised by one of the candidates was the putting up of income tax in order to fund education as one of the public services. And I wonder whether those here who are taxpayers already and those who may well be taxpayers within the lifetime of the Parliament would like to think about whether they would be prepared to pay more income tax to fund public services or would prefer not to. So a quick show of hands, how many people would be happy to pay more income tax to fund public services? And how many of you would not be prepared to do that, would not be happy doing that? Thank you very much. As a supplementary question, we have Paul Van Dam, who is a parent of a Bootham student here, and has a question, I think, probably, Paul, to direct more to Rachel than anybody else, I think, about the issue of VAT on school fees. So can we have that as a sort of supplementary here, please?
It's just coming. Yeah.
Do the candidates agree that the proposal to charge VAT on private school fees will prevent freedom of choice and limit the opportunities for children of Middle England parents?
This is obviously referring to a particular Labour Party policy, so it makes sense for you to answer this.
Well, Labour wants to give opportunity to all children, and the fact that we've got children going to school hungry in our city is just so disgraceful. And I've met parents who can't even afford food for their family. And therefore, what we have to reflect is the kind of society we are and what we want for all children, not just our own, and to make those determinations of how we can share the little bit that we have with others to make sure that they don't go without. And therefore, it's fundamental to Labour's policy to give every child an opportunity. And for those that can afford a bit more, to give to those totally without, I don't think is asking a lot. We know that when a child is properly nourished, and the money is going to make sure that all children can have a decent meal, that they will study and further their education. And that is to the benefit of the whole of society. And they're the kind of values which are at the heart of Labour, the Labour Party, always have been and always will be. We believe in that collective responsibility to enhance education for all. And when I tell you that I see parents that are struggling so much to feed their kids, I think every parent should reflect and say, actually, what can I do to make the system work better?
Any other candidates want to pick this one up?
I think the point I'd like to make is education is not a privilege that you pay for. Education is a fundamental human right. And the fact that certain people can access a better education simply because they have the money to is not something I believe that our society should have. And I'd like to think about that. I may be in the wrong place to say that, but I went to my local comprehensive. It was a very good comprehensive. I went to York University. I got a first-class degree, and my parents didn't pay for me to go to school. Private school isn't the be-all and end-all. That's all I'm saying.
It's not in our manifesto. So we've found other ways of funding free school meals and funding education in the 7 billion, such as putting corporation tax back up from 17 to 20%, and also, which may sound a little wacky, the marijuana tax as well, which is wacky tax on wacky backy, I guess.
Yes, indeed. I was waiting for that pun. I thought that was going to... I could see that one coming up. Telegraph that one.
That would raise £1 billion.
Okay. Do you want to say
No, I mean,
something?
the point I would make is that I think the main contribution of independent schools is you've got to get them more bought into the state system. So their charitable status should depend on the support they give to back. It's the expertise you really want. It's that level of support. What can independent schools to make sure that the state schools benefit from the expertise that's there? That's the fundamental contribution that can be made.
I'm going to get to go a little defensive just for a second. And mention that the involvement of this school in the York Independent State Schools Partnership, which is held up nationally as being perhaps one of the very best, if not the best examples of that sort of thing, is something that this event is being hosted by that organisation. I'm also going to be slightly controversial as well, if I dare be political just for a second, and simply reflect on the fact that to put 20% on independent school fees, regardless of what your feeling is about independent schools, will inevitably mean that large numbers of pupils will end up going back into the state sector. The independent sector schools will close, and therefore those pupils will have to have their education funded. And I'm not convinced myself yet that the sums add up on that one. So I'm going to step back into neutral mode just for a second. National debt. Scott Marmion, where are we? Scott.
I'd like to ask, what will your approach be to the national debt?
Ed, let's start with that one.
Well, good question. The fundamental thing is what Nick has just said right at the start. He took the words out my mouth. I was itching to say them, but he got there ahead of me. Normally, we've done 2 hustings so far, and normally Nick has gone ding whenever I said it, which is the number one thing you need to do to reduce our debt is have a strong and stable and growing economy. He didn't do ding this time, but he got there ahead of me. That's the number one thing.
It's 8:10. We've not done badly.
It's quite a long time in, I agree. But the basic thing you have to do is, a lot of the answers you've heard tonight to some really tough problems, too often the answer is just coming back to spending more money. You cannot have an economy which continues to pledge money to things we cannot afford. It's the easiest solution in the world when a difficult thing comes up to say, I'm going to invest more money in it, I'm going to pay more money. Not all good things go together. You have to find a way of making choices in politics. That is the job of being a politician. We took choices. With the Liberal Democrats, we took very difficult choices in 2010 to deal with the deficit that was out of control. The deficit is now down by 3/4. That is an enormous achievement. It was achieved at a huge political cost. But it's the right thing to do because it kept our credit rating stable. It meant that interest rates stayed low. It kept people in their homes. That is a fundamental thing that we have to keep doing. You cannot just say, it's the easiest thing to do. The easiest way to get a line of applause is I will spend more money on something. We cannot have a political system which is based on that. That is not what leadership is. Leadership is about taking choices. That's what we've done over the last 7 years, and we have to continue that for the future.
Thank you.
I'm going to say spend more money. But I'm going to kind of couch that in the fact that the Green Party believes that there is enough money to go around for all of these things. We just need to have a bit of a kind of conversation with ourselves about how we distribute the capital within our society. There's a lot of money tied up in financial institutions within the kind of 1%. And we need to find ways of unlocking that capital and bring it back into the economy, not only because that's the equal thing to do, but also that's actually the economically sound thing to do. If you've ever read Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, he outlines a really good argument why having capital basically accumulated in these areas and not shared amongst everyone and used to improve everyone's lives, actually, we can't afford that. That's not a sustainable solution.
Let's move along.
Well, in 2010, we heard that the government was going to clear the deficit in one parliament. In 2015, we heard the same, broken that promise twice. And of course, broken their own fiscal rule as well, which they created. That didn't seem to last very long either. And the reality is we still have a deficit because the way that the government have handled the economy is to choke off the economy, choke off the opportunity, not invest in the skills and the jobs. And that's why And I have to say, they haven't put the focus on growth in industry and productivity. And certainly their own reports. And now the Chancellor is condemning his own previous 7 years of government. And that's why we said we will put the investment in to our economy to make sure that we can grow ourselves out of debt. And that's why we're confident within a Parliament we will clear that deficit. And also, we have to remember the debt this country is into risen now to 1.7 trillion, personal debt now at 1.5 trillion, moving the risk off the state onto individuals, and therefore everybody now really feeling that tight squeeze. We want to help support people and invest in our public services and also in industry and growth. And that's why Labour have got a clear joined-up plan of how we will do that, costed, and we will deliver it.
Yeah, do you want to go back to just for a second, please? Obviously, you were sort of itching to defend the government's position there, I think.
Scott's question was actually about the debt, not the deficit. And the point I would make is that in 2010, we had the biggest deficit in our peacetime history. We'd never had a bigger deficit. So the concept of saying that Labour will somehow get a grip of our deficit is absolutely farcical. It was absolutely out of control. That's why we had to make those difficult decisions. That's why some of the very, very difficult decisions that were taken with the Liberal Democrats in 2010 had to be urgently taken to make sure that interest rates were low so we could service our debt. That was the crucial thing that had to be done back then.
I think Ed's being quite disingenuous. We know why we were in the situation we are, because of the global economic financial crash, of which the Tories agreed with the rules at the time. And therefore, whilst we have said that it's so important to tighten those rules and ensure proper scrutiny on the city, and that's why we'll separate off that banking and put investment banking back into all communities in all regions of our country.
There is a balance between debt and deficit, because what you need to do is you can control the national debt by cutting day-to-day deficit, if that makes sense. In other words, your overdraft and, in effect, what you're spending daily. You've got to invest in major infrastructure within the UK to create jobs and actually to make sure that there is wealth there. The problem, and I can't get round this, is the fact that we're going to be obsessed for the next, I'd say, 10 years, not 5, with Brexit. And that's a major economy that could be coming, we could be cutting off our nose to spite our face by actually coming out of the single market. And that's something that brings wealth into the country. I mean, a national poll, recently interviewed 2,000 companies. And they said that half of them are already being told by European companies that they have partnerships with that they're looking for other suppliers within the European Union. Now, for me, that is something that is astounding. And the strong and stable thing, everybody wants a strong and stable economy. The problem is it's slowing down at the moment. It's at its lowest for some time. And funnily enough, Europe is growing their economy faster than ours. So we need to be part of a European economy, a global economy, and also invest as well. So we've got to balance borrowing with investment.
Given the fact that I'm sensing that the reaction to this particular topic has probably been stronger than many, I wonder if we could have some just very quick 5-second punchy sort of one-sentencey comments from the floor on this one. If our microphone chucker-arounders could chuck around a microphone or two. Gentleman here. Alfie, there we are.
Before I came here this evening, I was skimming through the Labour Party manifesto, and I was just thinking of all the various...
Very quick, please.
Yeah, very quickly. Brexit is going to take up a lot of time and thought and discussion. How on earth are any of the parties going to get a lot of their policy commitments seen to?
Thank you.
Brexit's going to just take up all the time. Let's
leave the question hanging for a while. The gentleman at the back who put his hand up before?
Hello, yep. I just noticed that, Ed, I'm really sorry to be personal here, but you nod until the word invest is mentioned, and then you kind of cringe back into your seat. I wondered if you've actually read an economics textbook from kind of 20th century onwards, and how it mentions about something called the multiplier effect, which is, I'm trying to be quick, sorry, which is where if you invest, it actually increases GDP, and then you can actually, from there, further increase investment. This kind of austerity measure to the national debt is only a temporary fix, and then very quickly you lose your GDP, so you can't actually suck any more out of the public services.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One more comment on the back, please.
Hello, everyone.
Very quickly, please.
Unless my memory deceives me, Vince Cable, in his memoir, revealed that Labour had left a small deficit. Now, people's communities have been destroyed by the Tory government's cuts, so Ed, I'll assume all that talk about the deficit was going to destroy the economy, you were talking through your hat.
I'm the last person to actually defend the coalition, or should I say the Conservatives on this, but there was that classic note from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury which said, sorry, there is no money left.
Absolutely.
Which, you know...
One more point before we move on, Ed.
No, I think he said it for me.
OK, thank you very much. And let's move on to the next question then. This is from Fraser Forsyth, who's the parent of a student at Vale of York Academy, and also the governor of a local primary school. Where's Fraser? Thank you.
Thanks. If you found yourself elected and the opportunity arose for you to introduce a private member's bill, what would be the one piece of legislation that you would want to enact?
OK, so slightly less party political, a bit of a personal hobby horse issue here. Bethan, let's start with you.
Ooh, that's a very difficult one. Out of a long list, I think I'm going to have to go full on green and go for the Environmental Protection Act. And this is because climate change is the biggest thing that's facing every single person in this room, and not just every single person in this room, everyone outside of this room in York, in the UK, in Europe, across the world. And unless we take action now as a country and working with other countries to reduce the temperature rises below 2 degrees, we're not going to have much of a future to kind of debate all of this other stuff in. And actually, this is the timelines that they're looking at now. We're talking about 30 years. So, yeah, that is the one for me.
Okay. Ed.
I have two, actually, if I'm allowed them. Number one.
No, you had one.
Okay,
Just
well,
one.
I will go for the one I'm most passionate about. Supermarkets have a huge amount of food at the end of each day that can go to people in need. At the business I work for, at the end of every day, there's an app that's in all stores, and the colleagues can tap on it and alert any food charity nearby to come and collect the food. So it stops good food going in the bin. I would actually make it a policy, a law, that wherever possible, good food shouldn't go to waste. There's a very specific programme that Fair Share are running. I would try to make that mandated, if not mandated, but then certainly preferable in law, that every big retailer, every big food retailer, at the end of every day gives the good food that's available, doesn't put it in the bin, but wherever possible gives it to people in need.
Thank you very much.
I'd go for proportional representation. Safe seats are an anathema to me, simply because we were lucky, and we have had over the last 2 years. I thought I was going to say 5. A good MP, a good local MP. But there are a lot of MPs in Parliament which basically sit on big majorities and use it, in effect, to do very little, or at least to enact policies that aren't representative of their constituents. And be under no illusion, if the Conservatives do get back in, they're going to change the boundaries. And if they change the boundaries, it's going to make them be electable probably for another 20 years. And that's what's brought, actually, the Labour Party around to considering maybe looking at PR, simply because of the fact that you can't elect people where there are more people vote against somebody than for somebody, and then have several million votes for one party that has 9 seats, 8 seats, or even when we had 60 seats. That seems a long time ago. We got proportionately a far smaller amount of seats than our vote actually dictated. And I just think that it was something, funnily enough, that Tony Blair had secret talks with Paddy Ashdown when it looked as though he wouldn't get the big majority. He got the big majority, then just had a little bit of amnesia. But the point about it is, PR for me, let's get a proper voting system that is fair, that represents the wishes of the constituents.
Thank you very much. Rachel, your private members bill.
Well, I've got a very long list, but the top of my list will be a Clean Air Act. The fact that 40,000 people die prematurely from a silent killer of pollution is unacceptable in our country, and we need a Clean Air Act because the government has now been dragged to the courts 4 times and has still failed to produce a proper air quality plan. And therefore, we're not seeing the investment in our transport to green up our transport and to address our air quality, even air quality outside schools for those young lungs being exposed to the pollutants, the particulates and the gases there. So it is so important. People dying of asthma, people dying of COPD, and therefore a Clean Air Act is well overdue.
Whether this is an opportunity to bring some of the younger members of the audience in tonight and sort of ask the same question to them. If they were an MP and they had the opportunity to bring a private members bill, something that really mattered to them, to Parliament, what is it that our young people here would wish to put forward? Any brave souls willing to put a hand up and very, very simply give us an idea that matters to them?
Voting for 16-year-olds, maybe?
Perhaps. Anybody here? Rebecca? What would you have as your private members bill?
It's back on the schools idea of when actually Rachel Maskell was the only person who mentioned it, about the actual quality of the buildings of the schools. So I'd want to see in the state sector schools being actually rebuilt so they're fit for purpose.
Thank you.
I used to go to Huntington School and it's way above capacity for most of the buildings. My classrooms were very, very cramped for a lot of people, so it'd be good to get that put through.
So building schools, improving school buildings. Anyone else out of the younger members of the audience who want to throw something at us? Dom.
For me personally, it would be to keep the NHS completely in the hands of the people and to keep private money out of it, because in my own opinion, the health and well-being of the nation should not be dictated by corporate interests or the greed of private money.
Is there one more suggestion for a youth private members bill? One at the back. Richard.
This is explicitly linked to private members' bills in a way, which is, I think, the practising of filibustering out private members' bills and other bills should be illegal. And I suspect that what would happen is you would bring that bill up and it would be filibustered out. But I don't understand how this basically attack on democracy is being allowed to continue.
Thank you. I sense a lot of consensus about many of these things and a lot of passion in the room about them. That's been very useful to have a little sort of little meander into wouldn't it be lovely if territory. One more question I think we're going to have, and I think it's appropriate that we get back to where we started, because at least two of the parties here were citing Brexit as being the most important aspect of this particular election. So Jake Chong, who is one of our students here at Bootham, has got a question on that. Where's Jake?
Thank you. What would a successful Brexit negotiation look like for your party and why?
Let's start with you.
Single market. We've got to keep within the customs union. We've got to keep within the single market. In a previous life, I'm not reincarnated, by the way, but in a previous life, I was in international trade, and one of the things that we have is the harmonised customs rates. Now, the customs union, it means that you pay identical rates of tax within all countries if you're importing goods. Just one small thing, that if we actually exit that, we will have to renegotiate all of our customs tariffs, and that will put intolerable strain on a customs and computer called Chief, and it can't cope. It would fall over, and several customs officers have told me that. So that's one very, very small thing with regards to Brexit. Just out of interest, do people know how much Brexit, or should I say how much the European Union membership costs us per day? Per household, per day, 71 pence. So people say, oh, it's 55 million a day or 20 billion a year for us to have membership. They willfully ignore all the benefits we get from it. For instance, in 2015, we sent 13 billion to the EU. We received 4.5 billion back from EU in regional aid and agricultural subsidies. The private sector received a further 1.4 billion direct from the EU budget. So the net cost of membership actually was 7 billion, which is 0.5% of national income. Brexit, again, unfortunately, was something that David Cameron did to shut a few recalcitrant MPs up in his own party. It wasn't called for. There wasn't a big uprising of people asking to leave the EU. And both sides, actually, I've got to say, the Remain as well as the Brexit sides, performed atrociously, actually, in the debates, in giving people the information on which to base a choice. Hence our point about giving people the chance to walk away if we're going to get a bad deal, but always looking to get a good deal.
So there's another slight element of false consciousness. The person who first called for a referendum on the European Union was who? Nick Clegg. So all very well blaming David Cameron for calling a referendum, but actually that was the Liberal Democrat policy. The reality is Brexit is going to happen. The fundamental thing, I think, we've got to see it from our perspective, the people in this room, is not just as a national negotiation, but as an opportunity for York and the region. We are still so heavily dependent economically on London, overwhelmingly dependent. There are huge structural funds, the European Union structural funds, which come back, rebate the money we give to the European Union to rebalance our economy. The biggest thing, what would be a good Brexit for me, is we find a way of using that funding and also the way that Brexit is structured in our country afterwards to help rebalance our economy away from London, so people like you and others who graduate from university don't feel they have to go further afield to get a good job. We have to find a way of getting growth into our region and making the Northern Powerhouse real. There is a very specific policy that we have called the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I think that's a helpful start, but there's so much more. We need to make sure that Brexit's a success for York, not just for the UK.
Thank you. Rachel, successful Brexit for you?
Well, saying that the nation will be fine if we are spun off into the rest of the world with these fictitious trade deals that we don't know the full content of is totally reckless at the moment. And that's where the Prime Minister is quite happy for us to be settled at if she's not able to get a decent deal. We've said that we want a close partnership with Europe to get the benefits we currently do. The issues around the customs union and single market, absolutely crucial, because without the security within the trading bloc, the largest trading bloc in the world, we will start seeing, as we already are, the jobs and the companies putting their investments in mainland Europe as opposed to in the UK. And once we lose that investment and the city starts to move over to Frankfurt, then our whole economy will struggle. And therefore it's absolutely right that we put those values into the system as we move forward. Our national security is of the utmost importance, and we are constantly reminded of that, and therefore we've said that making sure that we continue our relationship with EU countries is at the heart of that, and also to make sure that we maintain our workers' rights, our environmental protections, our consumer rights, the things that we really benefit from. So the programme Labour has set out is a very close relationship with Europe, where we get all of those benefits. We share in research and continue those relationships of sharing across borders to make sure that we're at the heart of growing our country, but also giving to the European Union and receiving the benefits there. And one thing that we won't have is a no-deal situation, because, quite frankly, that means you can't negotiate. And for the Prime Minister even to contemplate that just shows that she really is out of touch of where we need to be.
It wasn't really talked about in the media much, but there was a left-wing progressive argument for leaving Europe. I don't personally believe in it. The Green Party don't personally believe in it. But we believe that there needs to be a final referendum on the deal with an option to reject or remain in the EU. Because for the reasons that's been laid out already, you don't just go into something like this blind, unknowing. We need to know what exactly is going to happen and give people a democratic opportunity to vote on that. But in terms of Brexit is going ahead, what's going to happen, I think we forget that people are involved in this. and people's lives are wrapped up in this. So I have a number of friends who live and work abroad in Europe and Germany and France, and we need to seek reciprocal agreements to ensure that EU citizens living in the UK currently, that they can be safe and secure, they can stay here, they can contribute to our economy, to our NHS, for example, which uses a number of workers from the EU, a very high proportion, but also safeguard the people from Britain who are out there in Europe, who have forged ties with Europe. You know, you get cases in the media of families who are expecting to be torn apart about this. There's also the other protections we would seek to keep in the UK, so environmental protections that are laid out in EU statute law. We want to see those kind of shored up in the UK and not done away with, as a Great Reform Repeal Bill will potentially give the Tories the opportunity to do. And I think it's just about seeking a reciprocal agreement with the EU and and it is about getting the best deal. And I know a lot of people talk about the best deal, but we need to think about what that actually looks like in an economic and in a non-economic sense.
Thank you. So we're going to begin to bring proceedings to a close now. What we're going to do in a couple of minutes' time is to ask you to vote again. And we're going to ask you to get your phones out if you haven't. It's not a phrase I thought I'd hear myself say in this room, I have to say. And if you haven't got a phone, there'll be the iPads going around. There are some iPad brandishers waiting at the back in a minute. So you can either vote on the iPads that are handed to you, or you can vote on your own phones. The address is up there on the screen. And while that happens, I'm going to ask each of the candidates, before that happens, ask each of the candidates in maybe one sentence, without too many nifty bits of punctuation to elongate them, to sum up what the heart of their campaign is. So, Nick, one sentence for you about your campaign, what you want people here to know about your position. Very quickly, very simply.
I'm someone that's lived in the city, loves the city, works in the city, promotes the city, and will do so with a very, very good knowledge of that in Parliament.
Rachel.
Labour has clearly set out that this election is about the many, not the few, to make sure the investment goes into the services which keep our country moving forward and invest in our future economy and jobs. And therefore, Labour are offering a real choice for the future growth of our country and for your future too.
I think whether you agree with a lot I've said tonight or whether you don't, the Green Party can be trusted. We believe in what we stand for and we act accordingly. So if you believe in the environment, you believe in keeping the NHS free, you believe in fully funding education, vote Green.
Ed.
You said at the start, Chris, that you thought there would be a different tone to the election after Monday. I think the fundamental thing is to recognise that politics isn't black and white. I strongly want, if you elect me on the 8th of June, a city that works for everyone. I want to work across the board with as wide as possible number of people as possible. They used to call York, when I was growing up, the second city of our country, and I strongly believe it's now time to have some first-rate ambition for the future.
Thank you. So, some of you already voting. The iPad brandishers will come around with the iPads. But while they do that, I've got a sort of slightly cheeky question for the candidates to talk about as this is going on. The question I'm going to ask you is, imagine it is the morning after the election, and very, very sadly, you have not been elected as the MP for York. What are you going to do with your day? Does anybody want to start me off on that one?
Well, if the count went on as long as last time, I'll get some sleep, because it actually finished at 8:30 a.m. last time. So,
you'll be sleeping?
Just a bit of R&R, you know.
Anybody else got any plans for the day afterwards?
Breakfast.
Okay.
Surely the first thing is breakfast.
But where?
Good question. The Perky Peacock in Lendal Bridge,
okay,
where I used to work. A great cafe.
I think I will be going to work and continuing all the kind of things I hope I've spoken about equality, progressive thinking in my work, because I believe and I act in what I do.
After breakfast?
After breakfast, well, my partner will cook me breakfast, so...
Excellent.
I've said it on stage, so we can't go back.
Well, I believe that Labour's got such a fantastic offer that I won't be put in that situation, so we'll be celebrating.
I somehow knew that one was coming as well. Thank you very much. And anyone else would like to vote and hasn't had the opportunity to do so? Asa, there's a couple of hands up there. Some over here. But anyone else got an iPad over there?
This one there.
Oh, no, actually, you haven't done the deal with him on breakfast yet.
He normally does it, but it might be like a special... Yeah.
Fire.
I do get a cooked breakfast every day. I'm very lucky.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's a good life.
Keep your hands up if you want to vote and have the chance to.
It is your patch.
I don't know whether you can use somebody else's phone or whether it just only gives you one opportunity. I'm not sure how that works.
Just go in and
Dom, there are some down the front here.
on nights, but just try and just say hello to the store manager. They've had a rough run.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, no, I'll definitely make the time.
Give me your email address. I'll send
Yeah, I'll
you
do
his
that.
details because they are a bit shaken up. And
It's terrible, isn't it?
These young people without their phones in school. What a great sight that is.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Tesco is amazing at times like this, so it kind of.
Any more for any more? Have you got your hand up or you did? No, just glasses twiddling. Anybody else would like to vote and hasn't had the opportunity to?
Oh gosh, I'm so hot.
Interesting to see if people change their minds.
We need like one of those air vaporizers, you know, that sprays you with like cool mist.
Any more? While we're finishing off, we will know a general shift if there has been one. Is anyone prepared to put their hands up to indicate that their mind has been changed over the course of the evening? In which case, no point in doing this whatsoever, it would appear.
There's no change.
I wonder if that will be actually indicated in the final percentages. As we're sort of allowing the computer to think about this and get its house in order, can I do several things? Can I firstly thank those of you who've come along this evening, have submitted questions, particularly those of you who did not have the opportunity to ask them. I think we'd have been here for a very long time if that had happened. Maybe we should have done, but I'm grateful for those people who've participated and not had a chance to ask their question this evening, and particularly also to those who have and have spoken out and contributed. Secondly, I'd like to thank Luke and his technical team. This has been a technical tour de force this evening.
The only thing I didn't realise was that the wheel was up there. Did you see that?
I did, because I got
Luke Gilliver, who is our technical guru at the school, and the team of students have been actually putting this on, and I'm really grateful to them. I'm grateful to the other team up there, people who've been fact-checking as we've gone along. I have to say that I have not been interrupted at all on the screen in front of me with anything that's been said that, if it's been fact-checked, has been proved wrong. So well done, candidates, for actually not just being on message, but actually, it appears, telling the truth as well, which is excellent. But to all the student helpers this evening, my thanks to them. A particular thank you to James Ratcliffe, whose brainchild this has been, and who's worked tirelessly and scrupulously fairly over the last few weeks to put this on. And last, but again, by no means least, thank you to our candidates for allowing themselves to be put under pressure this evening, for doing so in an extremely civilised and I think a very positive way. I think the atmosphere of the debate this evening has been excellent, and everything we would want to see in politics, whether it's before Monday or after Monday. I think it's been a very good exercise. To all those people, my grateful thanks, and let's show them our grateful thanks too. And I hope that Ben is going to come and tell us what I think we already know, unless you've been lying to me, in which case, see me in my study afterwards, please. The final results from this evening's poll. What have we got, Ben?
Well, if we start with the same slide we started last time, but with this poll, we will see the national results. And we'll see straight away, in fact, if we change to the we've got a slide that will show you how people's voting, who they will vote for, has changed. We'll see that there has been a massive change. In fact, the Conservatives appear to have been the winner on a national scale, gaining many votes, whereas all the other major parties have lost votes to the Conservatives, and the other have actually gained a very small amount. Looking at the specific seats now, starting with York Central, we will see that, as opposed to earlier when Rachel Maskell was leading, it now appears to be Ed Young who has the majority of the votes, maintaining all of the votes he had earlier and actually gaining from other and the Labour Party. If we look at the change, we will see this as mainly a loss for the Labour Party and a gain for the Conservative Party. If we now look at York Outer, we will see that the Labour Party is still leading, but all the other parties have made gains. If we look at that, we will see that, in fact, the Conservative Party made the biggest gains, even though they are not the leaders, and the Labour Party, even though they have the largest share of the vote, in fact, made quite a significant loss. And that is, I think, it.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much indeed. There's been a great deal spoken, hasn't there, in the media over the last 2 years about the validity of opinion polls in advance of elections. And I think we've just had, in a sort of pseudo-democratic way, a perfect example of that particular issue. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Vote well, and let's keep our democracy thriving. Thank you very much indeed. Well done. Thank you.